stage was too far away. So nice to see all of you. I thought I would start out, since I have been an intentional nomad for quite some time. That means I travel between places and work and things that are calling to me. So I thought I'd give you a picture of my personal office. This is my personal office. And no, it isn't. What happened to my personal office? Do I have to do something? Oh, I have to do something. She has to do something. That was just a sneak peek. So that you... Since 2004, I haven't had a permanent address until I moved to Copenhagen this year, and that's been an interesting journey. So this is how my suitcase looks if you actually meet me in the airport or on the street. This is my suitcase, and I have set it up intentionally to be what I call a portable public intervention. So one side of my suitcase says, "Take back the power of your story." And the other side says, "What question could change your life?" And when I see people looking at my suitcase, I think, ha. You saw the question, so what's the answer? It gives me an opportunity to provoke people as I'm moving through space. So right at this moment, we are living in a time of big changing story. And we are living in a time when the clash of stories is quite obvious. And here in Europe, it's quite... people are walking up the roads and they're living in the train stations. It's easy to see how change of story is coming towards us. So the question is, do we decide to see the story that's coming up the road in the form of people who are migrating as a dangerous wave of people who are going to overwhelm us? Or might we choose a different story? Could we think maybe this is the most elegant redistribution of talent on the incredible planet? It's up to us how we decide to see this story. So what I wanted to provoke with you tonight are three things, really. First of all, I want to raise that we live in a time of possibility. You could think we live in a time of challenge, but this is a time when we have the opportunity to change the kind of story we're telling. It's also the time when changing the story is paramount, because there's an or else. We heard about the or else earlier. We're on that cusp moment where we can actually choose. And I want to also say that you are important to making that change. Each one of us can change the story, because each one of the small things we do over and over again are the way that stories change. It's not the dramatic big difference, it's the being kind more often, and holding to that even when it's really, really hard. So this is the time, and you might just think it's here, but actually no, it's everywhere. I know people who have been working in Japan since the triple disaster, and that particular event, the earthquake, the tsunami, the meltdown of nuclear reactors, put a charge right through that structure of being that has been in Japan for eons and eons. The story has to change everywhere, so we are not alone here in Europe with that need. I spent some time studying the way that stories work, and we studied for a couple of years the story of Denmark going bankrupt in 1813. So the 5th of January 1813, Denmark went bankrupt. That could be dramatic news, except that if you say to a Dane, "Wow, I'm studying the 5th of January 1813, they say, "What?" Nobody in Denmark knows the story that Denmark actually went bankrupt. But the interesting thing about this story is that 50 years later, it led to what would be called the Golden Age. Now, a lot of people have studied the Golden Age. Nobody studied what came before the Golden Age to learn how it might be that dramatic change and dramatic challenge might lead to something better. And we learned out of that story that it was staying together in conversation for long enough. It was groups of people staying connected, what is called the Trojan mice. You know what a Trojan horse is? Yeah. Well, Trojan mice are a group of people who sneak in under the door sill. You don't notice them. They pop up in your environment, and they're connected enough to make change. And that's exactly what happened in Denmark in 1814, when the king declared universal education. Because he said, wise man that he was, we might be poor, but we don't have to be stupid as well. Enlightened monarch. So Denmark was one of the first places to institute universal education, and that came directly out of being so bloody broke that they couldn't do anything else but turn to a new way of being. So these kind of stories are exciting. And they provoke us to think, what other stories could we work with and tell that might be interesting? The only monarch at the moment on my list that I would actually like to meet is Queen Margrethe. She said, what if all the disharmony and wars in the world are because of the conversations that did not happen? She is, I think she also smokes cigarettes and drives too fast. That's why I also find her very interesting. But this kind of idea that if we talked to each other, if we stayed in conversation, if we shared our stories more, we might be more intelligent is something I just really want to provoke with you. And I want to say that I've heard around the world in my own work the plea from the heart of humanity, and this is it here. I saw it in Bratislava in 2013 when I was working with Habitat for Humanity. Two parts of that organization were being forced together. The group in Pretoria and the group in Bratislava. Totally different ways of looking at the world, totally different ways of orienting themselves, and they were being forced by the international office to work together. Everybody was unhappy. But I got the privilege of working with them, and in the opening time together, when we asked, what do you hope for out of our time together, somebody wrote this on a post-it note. I hope for us to come home together. Do you hear that call from the heart of humanity? I hope for us to come home together. That is my greatest wish too. So the question to you is, what story is needed right now? And what story are you living in? Because the story you are living in is also the one you are living into. So Ben, I love the way you were reformatting the story about the possibility of where you came from and what that might mean. And so that the story you are living into is a fundamentally different story than other people want to put onto you. So we have the opportunity to take charge of the most important real estate on the planet. I'm going to point to it. It is the real estate right between your ears. That is the most important place that you need to focus on, because that's where your stories live, and they can make all the difference to you or not. If you are human, then you are a storyteller. That's the good news. And it might be interesting to get really good at it, because story is what moves everything. We need stories in order to learn. In fact, that was our earliest learning. I wanted to hear you say story too. We learn by telling stories to each other and by listening to stories. And, you know, there's the question. This says in Danish, is anybody going to read us a bedtime story? You know, like at the moment we're getting so busy that we're not actually focusing on the fact that this mind is wired through story. We love stories. In fact, we love to hear stories that are not the ordinary everyday. If you just say, I got up this morning, it was fantastic, and now I'm home, then we're like, yeah. If you say, wow, I got up this morning, you would not believe what happened then. Then all of us are leaning forward, yeah, what happened then? Because we want to learn from you something that's going on. We want to learn, that's how we learn best, is by hearing from other people so that we can try it on like a new coat and see if it fits us. And if it fits us well, we can learn from your story. Those are the stories that are most powerful. So I was doing a little bit of a brainstorming with myself about stories. Stories travel between places, and if you ask me, I consider myself a librarian in the story library, because stories are the library of humanity. For far too long, we have been playing on the fear shelf. I think fear must have a call number of -5 or -10 or something. 398.2 is a shelf I like very much. That's folk tales, fairy tales, and myths. I think you should hang out there a little bit. We need to get off the fear shelf and move to a different level of story, because out of the resonance of fear, we cannot create something new. So how could you do that? Well, first of all, you could learn how to host yourself. You could have a personal practice that enables you to be present enough. Why is that important? Because judgment and curiosity cannot exist in the same place. The way we're going to move to something different is to stay as curious as possible. That's why 5-year-olds are eminently dangerous, because they're asking, why? 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 And I like about age 9, because they are incredible. You can have good conversations and they're still really curious. And it's also important that you take back the power of your own story. I saw this when I got into the airport in Prague yesterday, and I went, the Czech Republic knows about the power of story. Here we are. If you only knew that fairy tales never end here, you could already be living one of your own. In fact, you are already living in your own story. The question is, what kind of story is it? And could you take back your power? So I want to ask you to do something. They're flashing me with some messages of timing, but I want to ask you in a moment to turn to somebody next to you, because I think this is the biggest question on the planet for all of us. It is a moment of discernment. What is mine to do? We all get messages from our parents. They want us to do some things. Our politicians want us to do some things. People want us to do a lot of stuff, but it's interesting to find out our own story and our own pathway. What is your unique contribution? What is the thing you are here to bring on this earth? So I want to invite you to turn to somebody next to you, given that we're in a state of dramatic change, but also possibility. Given that you have some unique skills and talents, something that you can do that probably nobody else can do. I wonder if you found out what that is. And that many of you are working with young people who are going in the future to make a big difference, hopefully, to who we are as a humanity. In this moment, what is yours to do? Could you please turn to somebody next to you for about the next 3 minutes and just have a conversation. What is mine to do right now? And think about, you've been in a habit? From here on, what is it? Is there something there? Well done. Thank you very much. I have just a few things I want to suggest to you that you could be working on that are simple but not easy. Here's the first one. You could really practice listening. If you want to be a good storyteller, you also have to be a great story listener. There's a lot of hearing going on in the world, but there's very little listening at the moment. And there's a lot of people speaking louder because nobody ever listens to them. And in the work I do, I often do trio storytelling. I love that form. It's so fantastic. Somebody who's the storyteller, somebody who is the harvester, taking notes on content, and somebody who is the witness, that is, context and listening for the person. This role, the witness, what the Japanese would call the sacred witness, the one who comes from outside the system, therefore they can give you wisdom because they can see things that you cannot, is something we very rarely practice, but boy, is it needed right now. You might be different to me, but can I be with you and whoever you're being at the moment, even if I don't like it? And so that you know that you're heard, so that you can also hear me. Sometimes you got to hear first. You got to really listen first before you're going to get listening. So this is something really incredibly interesting to practice, especially as a leader. Secondly, appreciation is the easiest way to move something on. I love this card I got in a workshop recently. Appreciation is micro-hosting. It's fantastic. That's why I took a picture of it. Appreciation is one of the most powerful tools to help people become who they could be. If you can notice any small thing about somebody and appreciate it, it works. And if you could help us to make a new story for this word leadership. We have been through the heroic leader model, the one leader, we're going to elect somebody who's going to save us. You know, somebody's the Messiah. It's like we need to reformat that whole concept. When I'm looking at the word lead, I often see, let every action demonstrate. Who am I being that enables other people to be who they could be? It's interesting to change that. And also to look at where is the possibility for co-creation. I think joyful co-creation is probably what us humans love to do the most. We love it. When it's working well, we love it. And we don't get enough opportunity to co-create together. And we need to learn how to do that again. We've been in some societies totally into the individual, and we've forgotten the collective. Or maybe we're so totally in the collective the individual can't live. So where is the dance between these two things? Can we change some of that? And I want you to know what I think mine is to do, what I would like to do right now, because I have my eye on another story, and it is the peace story that's at the heart of the European Union. I've read Jean Monnet's autobiography. I believe he was diligent between World War I and well after World War II, looking for how to make Europe a peaceful place. The taming of Europe is an interesting thing, and the peace story is not awake at the moment. But what if it were? I'm carrying the question with me. What if Europe decided to embody the story of peace and be a force for good on this planet? And I'm here to witness you into doing that. And I think if Europe could really crack how we live in diversity and the gifts and beauty of diversity, man, you guys, it's such an important thing for this whole planet right at the moment. I'm looking to you. Because I think the scouting movement could be really important to that. Guess what? I was a scout for almost 10 years. Woo! So I'm back home again. And I think this is the story that we could manifest with each other. And the final thing I want to leave you with is a quote from Martin Luther King, who said, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is the power connecting everything or correcting everything that stands in the way against love." So thank you so much for doing the work you're doing, and please take back the power of your story and help us all to be in the best story we possibly can be together. Thank you.
So, do we have a question for Mary Alice after this presentation, after you have spoken with each other? Do we have time for one question? So if somebody has got an idea that popped up and they would like to get their curiosity satisfied or raise a point that hasn't been raised, now would be the time.
What is yours to do?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. What I want to do is activate the peace story at the heart of the European Union. That's what is the next big thing on my plate, because if we were in fact living in that story, things would be dramatically different right now. So the question is, I have a question, what is a European? So people are talking about the European narrative, but just like the Asian narrative or the African narrative, this thing doesn't exist actually, because we are all little pockets of different narratives hoping to kind of be together. But what if there were a European narrative? So Europe in Greek means the wide-seeing one, or the one with the beautiful eyes. And the wide-seeing one is interesting. You know, that diversity that goes all the way from Portugal into the Russian steppes, you know, that's an incredible diversity, east-west and also north-south. It's amazing we can even live together. Wow. And the European Union talks about the well-being of all 500 million citizens. It's the one place on the planet that has well-being enshrined in its whole purpose. So what if that were really awake, and what if we were interested in the well-being of each other? And what if we were practicing peace? So that's mine to do, I think. Or at least I feel her call in some way.
So, Mary Alice, I wish you good luck with what's yours to do. Maybe we manage to help along a little bit, because it might be ours to do as well, even though we might have identified something else as the thing to do right now. I would like to thank to all the 4 inspiring speakers from the first part of the conference. Thank you very much.